RJ, first question when it comes to the Kraken, because we've got a couple here. One of the things we still see so much of, and it rightfully so, is related to are the Kraken struggles a coaching or a system thing?
Hmm.
And you know, I totally get it. Hackstall, he wasn't necessarily the most revered coach when the Kraken hired him. Definitely came out of left field for everybody, I think. That being said, I don't think it's been terrible, but we've talked a lot last week and through several post games this week about his style of coaching and how he's more of a developmental coach, and that there are other styles of coaching. We saw one last night in Boost Boudreaux, very different.
Hmm.
And I think it would be good to start off this question just kind of explaining the three different types of coaching styles, at least as I see them. Uh,
Right.
and you and I have talked about it some. So to start off, we'll talk about a coach like Hackstall, a developmental coach, and really what that means. And ultimately, what that means is these are coaches that focus on working with players and bettering them as players individually. And so last night I started on this a little bit on the post game live. When you look at Jeremy Lauzon, right, he was playing really poorly at the beginning of the year. There was a lot of issues, but we've all been talking about how far along he's come as the year's gone on. He's gotten a lot better. His positioning's gotten better. His decision making's gotten better. He's kind of opening up offensively at times. He's improving a lot. Will Borgen, being a young, inexperienced defenseman, has come in and played really, really well. Hayden Fleury, arguably playing his best hockey at times here with the Kraken. And then guys like Ryan Donato, who probably would not be in the NHL right now if the Kraken didn't exist. And he looks like he totally belongs in the NHL, potentially, a middle six guy, maybe even a top six guy at times. He just looks like a completely different player from what we've seen at some of his other stops along the way, certainly from a productivity standpoint. And I think a lot of that has to do with Hackstall and his system for developing players and especially young players and working on them on what some of their flaws are, what they're struggling with, bettering those, and then bettering them as individual players as a whole. And I think that that's really important, and we see it in those individual performances. What you run into with a developmental coach is they spend a lot of time focusing on developing those individual skills and individual players, putting a lot more onto the team as a whole from a motivational standpoint and from a kind of a responsibility standpoint. So they're not going to micromanage a game, a developmental coach. And we see that from Hackstall. He's not on the bench trying to talk to anybody really. Um, he's not going to be tweaking things a ton in game. Yes, obviously everybody changes lines around if they're trying to get something going or whatever. But you're not going to be making like big systematic changes in the middle of a game and trying to implement anything like that. That's just not the style of this kind of coach. So you put things like motivation onto the team. You put things like certainly personal motivation. It's more of an idea of you as a player are a professional. This is your job, so it's on you to go out there and be motivated and play hard and, execute whatever it is we as a team are trying to do because it is your job. I understand that a lot. Obviously, they are professionals, they are getting paid to do this. It makes sense that you would say that, okay, you've got to, do your job and you've got to show up and you've got to do X, Y, and Z. However, as with any job or any job force, workforce, for people to do their best job, certainly consistently, they have to have two things. They have to be happy. So you kind of got to keep them happy and work with them in that sense. And, they need to want to do their job. Like they need to enjoy it. They need to be motivated. It's just a fact of life. It's how human beings are. And so having a coach that's going to just kind of put off some of that motivational stuff and just say like, well, it's your job. You just got to do it. I'm going to focus on making you the best person at your job, and then it's on you from there to just kind of take the skills I'm going to give you and run with it. You run into problems, and I think that that's showing with the Kraken right now is they come out flat sometimes. Certainly they'll start games slow at times, and certainly this week with the whole we're going to give up a goal right after we score kind of thing. That's a motivational thing. That's a developmental coach not necessarily wanting to micromanage it, not wanting to get involved with the players in that way, just kind of putting it on them. And we're seeing that That is the downside of a coach like that. For all the good and all the, uplifting aspects for players individually, you struggle here. And that's certainly something that served him well coaching college hockey, right? Like that's how you want coaches in, major, junior, college, all the way down to the squirt level, right? Like that's all we were ever trying to do at the squirt level. It's not about winning championships when they're 9. You're just trying to make them better players, teach them the game, all that kind of stuff. But
And
maybe
there's
at
so much development going on at that age
yeah,
level too,
exactly.
that whoever's going to be able to develop the best is going to also win the most games as
Yes.
well.
Yeah. So that's the hack stall approach, and that's that developmental style of coaching. One of the other systems, and this is what I think Boudreaux kind of falls into, is yes, they're more strategic when it comes to having a system, and they're going to work on the system, and they're going to micromanage their system kind of game to game. But ultimately, a coach like Bruce Boudreaux, and I tried, I could not think of a better way of saying it, but they motivate with fear, right? And it's all about, I'm going to make your life a living hell, and I'm going to yell at you, and I'm going to call you out if you screw up. If you don't do something right, I'm going to make sure you know about that, and I'm going to do it in front of the team. And so I'm going to essentially use peer pressure and, you're not wanting to disappoint me as an authority figure, and I'm going to use all that to make sure that you're giving it your all. And you know what? It totally works. It certainly works when that kind of coach is put into a new situation like we're seeing in Vancouver. Like that is exactly kind of what this Vancouver Canucks team needed, was they needed somebody that was going to really light that fire under them. And Boudreaux seems to have done it, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But where you run into issues with a coach like this, and why me and RJ weren't exactly like, yes, this is the answer for the Kraken, is certainly come playoff time. Because what you run into is teams in the playoffs will kind of quit on coaches like Boudreaux, because at the end of the day, you're just yelling at them. And at some point, the threat level goes away, because it's at some point you just recognize, well, I'm a professional. I'm a grown ass man. You're talking to me like this. I make more money than you. You're talking to me like this, right? Like at some point, it loses its effectiveness. But especially in the playoffs, you need to help get guys kicked into that extra gear. You need to push them through the fatigue of having just played a full season and now having to sacrifice their bodies more than ever before on a deep playoff run. And just yelling at them or calling them out when they make a mistake is not going to do that. And that's why we tend to see these coaches fail in the playoffs. Very successful in regular season, horrible when it comes to playoff track record. And we see that with Bruce Boudreaux. Wonderful regular season coach. Has only made one conference finals appearance. That's it. Think of all those amazing teams he has coached. One conference final. So obviously it is not a recipe for success come playoff time. The third kind of coach are the pure motivators and the like team guys. Like we're all in this together, and I'm just going to make sure everybody's feeling good all the time, and if everybody's feeling well, they're going to play well and we're going to win together. And the top person who popped into my head as a former Penguins fan was Dan Bilesma. And yes, you could argue he's somewhat of a developmental coach too, with all of his AHL experience and all of that. But really, at the end of the day, what he did with the Penguins was he was just a pure motivator. And he came in at a time, he made them feel good. They go on, they win that first Stanley Cup with him. And it does work, again, kind of for a time, because you're working with everybody, everybody's feeling good. They're then playing well, they're performing at their best. You get over losses really easy. You don't kind of get into bad streaks. You can keep winning streaks going, kind of, because everybody's really feeling it and getting excited. And we certainly saw that with those Penguins teams, right? They would go entire months without losing a hockey game. Absolutely incredible what they were able to do. But the problem with those kinds of coaches is they're absolutely the last coach to make a change if a change is needed, whether it's a player personnel change or a system change, because they've been successful just from motivating their way out of it. We're just going to positive energy our way out of whatever problem is going on, because that's what works for them and that's just what their style is. And at the end of the day, there are times where other teams are going to figure out your best players. They're going to figure out your system, and you need to be able to make changes. And those kind of pure motivator coaches, they tend to make those changes way too late, and that's what ends up costing them their jobs. Is that, at some point you have to adjust tactically, you have to make some systematic changes, you have to play smart hockey. You can't just make sure everybody's feeling good all the time. It's just not enough.